Malik moved through the dusty market under the twin suns. His cart rattled with every step. He wore a faded uniform, and his face showed lines of age and determination. The air smelled of spice and metal. He pushed his cart, calling softly fresh. "Water, cool for your thirst." His voice was calm and steady. He had sold water in many places. This desert world was no different. The ground shimmered with heat, and the wind carried grit. Aliens with tall, spindly legs and bright chitinous shells watched him. They clustered in groups, whispering in clicks and hisses. Malik heard them. They called him weak and old. They laughed at his worn clothes and his simple cart. One alien spat a puddle of sand at a crate nearby. Another slapped a claw on his thigh, mocking his age. But Malik said nothing. He kept moving. His eyes remained focused on his task. Children ran between stalls. Their laughter contrasted the harsh heat. One child, a sandy-haired girl, held a small vial of water. She skipped ahead of her mother, turning to admire a colorful display of spices. Suddenly, her foot slipped on a sandstone pebble. She cried out as the vial flew from her hand. It spun in the air, glinting under the sun. Without a word, Malik sprang. His movement was smooth, like a dancer's. He reached out and caught the vial with gentle precision. The nearby aliens fell silent. They had not expected such quickness. Malik smiled and handed the vial back to the girl. She hugged it close and ran back to her mother, eyes wide with wonder. A small crowd gathered. Humans nodded their thanks. Aliens shuffled, uncertain. A young human soldier in worn armor clapped his hands. "Impressive," he said. Malik only nodded and returned to his cart. He lifted a brass scoop and poured water into a clay cup. Set it on the cart's edge, ready for the next customer. Suddenly a thief crept from behind a pile of crates. The alien had a lean form and sharp eyes. He reached toward the cart, fingers brushing the clay cups. He thought no one would notice, but Malik did. He saw the shimmer of the thief's shadow long before the hand moved. Malik waited, his body coiled like a spring. The thief grabbed a cup and lurched backward. In a single motion, Malik pivoted. He placed his foot firmly on the ground, twisting his hips. He swept out an arm and caught the thief's wrist. The cup flew out of the thief's hand and shattered against a crate. Malik pressed a gloved palm to the alien's shoulder. His grip was firm yet controlled. The thief raised his free hand in surrender. Malik released his wrist and stepped back. His eyes met the thief's. The alien saw no anger there, only calm and strength. The thief nodded and backed away, ashamed. The crowd gasped. A tall alien with blue markings leaned forward. "Oh!" It clicked. "He is old. He moves with the speed of youth." Another alien hissed in surprise. Malik turned back to his cart, picked up a small tin, and offered it to the nearby soldier. "Thank you," he said softly. The soldier accepted the tin and slipped a coin inside. He grinned. "You are more than a vendor, Malik." Malik only smiled and continued his work. He poured water, weighed coins, and greeted each person with respect. The aliens watched from a distance, their earlier mockery replaced by curiosity. Some even whispered among themselves. They leaned toward each other, studying the water vendor with new eyes. As the suns dipped lower, the market lights blinked. On, lanterns glowed in warm yellows and reds. The air cooled slightly. Malik closed his cart for the day. He wiped his brow and gathered his coins. He had earned enough to refill his reserves tomorrow. He looked at the horizon, where his convoy waited. His human squad was far ahead, scouting the route. They did not know he watched over them. They thought him a simple vendor. They did not suspect he had once walked battlefields and led men into the fiercest fights. They did not know he carried scars under his clothes or the memories of lost brothers. Malik lifted the cover of his cart and packed away the remaining cups, tied the reins, and hoisted a heavy water drum onto his back. He felt the weight, but did not complain. Steps were sure as he walked toward the waiting convoy. The aliens began to disperse, still talking about the water vendor's skill. Malik's heart was steady. He carried more than water. He carried hope for the thirsty and strength for the weak. Tomorrow, they would mock him again. but he would. Be ready. He would protect his squad. And they would one day know his true name, the deadliest warrior. Malik rose before dawn, the pale light of the first sun slipping across the horizon. He knelt by his cart and checked his supplies. The clay cups were gone, but his mission had changed. Today he would walk with soldiers instead of sellers, shouldered a water drum, and set off toward the rendezvous point. The convoy waited at the edge of the settlement. 3 armored transports sat idle, their engines humming softly. A dozen soldiers stood nearby, adjusting their gear and trading. Stories? Malik approached in silence. He carried only a canteen and a small pack, but the soldiers barely glanced at him. They saw only the old vendor. "Nice morning for a walk, huh?" said a young private, kicking at a loose stone. Malik nodded without looking up. His eyes scanned the sky and the dunes beyond. The air was crisp, but danger could bloom anywhere here. He remembered lessons learned long ago. Stay alert, no matter how calm it seems. The squad leader, Sergeant Reed, tapped Malik on the shoulder. "We could use an extra hand," he said. His tone was more polite than mocking. Malik offered a small smile and joined the formation. The soldiers fell into step, their bulkier frames forming a loose circle around him. They marched through the desert, the transports lumbering behind like wounded beasts. Sand clouds followed in their wake. Malik's boots sank into the dunes, but he kept pace. The soldiers chatted about home, their voices light. They did not speak of battles, though some bore scars beneath their sleeves. As they rounded a rocky outcrop, Malik paused. He knelt and examined footprints in the sand clusters. Of 3-toed prints, narrow and erratic. Alien raiders, he thought, or worse. He rose and fell in step with the squad again, wordless warning. Private Jess. The chatterbox of the group leaned toward Malik. "You see that?" she whispered. Her eyes flicked to the tracks. Malik only shook his head. He had seen far worse. She frowned, but fell silent. The convoy crawled forward. The weight of the transport slowed them. Malik walked beside the lead vehicle, canteen at his side. Sweat traced lines down his back, though the morning was cool. He felt the tension in the squad, a quiet hum of nerves. Suddenly, a piercing screech shattered the air. Malik tensed. The convoy halted. Soldiers raised their rifles. From behind a dune, alien raiders burst forth, skin like polished obsidian. Limbs bent at odd angles, weapons that spat green bolts. They charged with inhuman speed. Chaos erupted. Malik watched as the squad reacted. Sergeant Reed barked orders. Soldiers scattered for cover. Green fire cracked against metal plating. One transport rocked as a bolt struck its hull. Private Jess dropped behind a boulder, rifle at the ready. Malik did not hesitate. He moved toward the attackers in smooth strides. His uniform hid his lean frame, but his eyes burned with purpose. He reached into his pack and withdrew a short blade, balanced, sharp, and silent. He had carried it for years. The first raider lunged at a soldier behind a rock. Malik slid forward, planting his foot and twisting his body. He brought the blade across the raider's wrist. The alien screamed as the weapon dropped. Malik's grip was firm but controlled. He shoved the raider aside and sprang back. Another raider aimed its blaster at Sergeant Reed. Malik darted between them, caught the bolt midair with a quick pivot of his blade, sending it harmlessly into the sand. The raider hissed and raised. Its weapon again. Malik closed the gap. The single strike, he disabled its weapon arm. The squad watched in awe. Private Jess peeked from behind her cover. She saw Malik move with purpose, his blade a silver arc in the sun. He did not shout or boast. He struck precisely and retreated just as quickly. More raiders advanced. They formed a wedge, cutting off the convoy's escape. Malik sprinted forward, feinted left, and then rolled under a blaster bolt. The heat singed his sleeve. He sprang up behind a raider, grabbed its shoulder, and twisted. The alien collapsed, stunned. He knelt beside it and tore the raider's energy pack free. With a quick motion, he hurled it at its comrades. The packs exploded in a burst of sparks and smoke. Raiders fell back, disoriented. Bleak did not pause. He dashed to the convoy's side and shouted, "Fall back to the transports." The soldiers, emboldened by his command, obeyed. They gathered around the transports, returning fire with disciplined volleys. The raiders, shaken by the explosion and the humans' resilience, hesitated. Malik climbed onto the side of the lead transport and peered over the edge. A raider aimed at him. Malik stepped forward and caught the bolt again between blade and fist. He shattered the weapon in midair and jumped down, landing softly. The battle turned. Soldiers rallied around Malik's silent leadership. They moved as one, clearing the area of raiders. Within moments, the field was still. Only the groans of wounded and the hiss of cooling metal remained. Sergeant Reed approached Malik. A bolt had grazed his arm, but he ignored the pain. He clasped Malik's shoulder. "I didn't know vendors could fight like that," he said. Malik only nodded. He scanned the horizon for further threats. There were none. Private Jess walked over, her rifle slung at her side. She knelt beside a fallen comrade, offering water in a clay cup to soothe the shock. Malik joined her and poured water with gentle hands. She met his gaze. "We owe you our lives," she murmured. Malik glanced away. "I owe you none," he said. "We watch each other's backs." His words were simple, but they carried weight. The soldiers looked at him with new respect. The convoy's urgency returned. The well lay beyond the next ridge. They had to reach it as they reloaded. The transports intended wounded. Malik moved among them. He offered water, bandaged cuts, and quiet reassurance. The aliens had mocked him this morning, but now they saw something else. A warrior standing in plain clothes. The squad formed a tighter circle. As they resumed their journey, Malik walked at the edge, ever watchful. The convoy rumbled onward, engines throbbing against the silence of the desert. The suns climbed higher, and the day heated up. Malik felt the weight of his pack, the hum of the transports, and the steady steps of the soldiers. He carried more than water, carried their trust. The path to the well was long, and danger still lay ahead. But with Malik at their side, the squad felt safer. The desert stretched before them, a sea of sand and stone. The soldiers fell into a quiet march. None laughed or joked now. They had seen the water vendor's strength. They had glimpsed the warrior beneath the uniform. Malik moved in silence, his eyes on the horizon. The journey was just beginning, and he was ready. Malik walked beside the transports as the convoy climbed over a sandy ridge. The suns beat down, and sweat darkened his uniform. The squad moved in a tight formation, each member trusting Malik to watch their flank. Private Jess carried the wounded. On a makeshift stretcher, Sergeant Reed checked the engines of a transport, frowning at a sputtering valve. Malik slowed his pace to help, loosening a bolt with a small wrench he carried. As he worked, Malik's mind drifted back to a time long ago. He remembered a training ground on a rainy planet called Kashlak. Young recruits lined up in muddy trenches, their hands shaking around rifles. A drill instructor barked orders, his voice echoing against stone walls. Malik was one of those recruits. He stood tall, despite the cold and the rain, listening to each command. The memory felt distant, like a half-forgotten dream. A sudden jolt brought Malik back. The transport's engine roared to life. Sergeant Reed nodded in thanks and climbed back aboard. Malik wiped grease from his hands and resumed walking. The convoy rolled forward, kicking up clouds of fine dust. The desert stretched out in waves of yellow and orange. He glanced at Private Jess, whose brow was lined with worry. She limped slightly from an old ankle injury. Malik watched her carefully, offering a small bottle of water when she paused to rest. They reached a shallow valley where hardy scrub plants struggled to grow. The well lay hidden among those plants. The squad spread out to scout, rifles at the ready. Malik knelt beside a thorny bush and inspected footprints. Human boots and alien claws left mixed tracks. He looked up at the ridge opposite. A group of aliens stood there, their shapes dark against the bright sky. They watched silently. Sergeant Reed signaled a halt. He motioned for Malik to join him. "We may need to flank," Reed whispered. Malik nodded and pointed toward a narrow path. Through the scrub, the path led to a natural cave that opened near the well. The soldiers followed Malik's lead, moving quietly through the low brush. Their footsteps were careful, and their breaths came slow. Inside the cave, shadows danced on wet walls. Dripstones hung like icicles, though the air was hot. The squad paused at the entrance. Malik crouched and peered out. The well's mouth shone in the distance, a dark circle in the bright sand.
No raiders appeared?
He gave a subtle nod, and the soldiers crept forward as they reached the well. Jess knelt and tested the water with a cup. She drank and smiled. "It's clean," she said softly. The squad cheered in quiet relief. Malik set down his pack and opened a valve on the drum to fill every empty container. Water flowed with a gentle hiss. Each soldier drank deeply. Their thirst faded, replaced by gratitude. While they worked, Malik's thoughts returned to Kashlak. He remembered the night. Rain turned to ice. He stood guard over a wounded comrade, a young man named Torin. Torin's leg was broken, and he whispered in pain. Malik knelt beside him, offering a canteen of warm broth. The raid came without warning. Alien beasts burst through the trench walls, teeth bared and claws ready. Malik rose, his heart pounding. He fought with Torin at his side, protecting the injured soldiers until help arrived. He carried Torin to safety, ignoring his own wounds. That night, a captain pinned a medal to Malik's chest and called him a hero. A cough brought Malik back to the present. Private Jess held out a bandage, her face serious. "You're bleeding," she said. A thin line of blood ran from Malik's forehead, where a thorn had cut him as he passed the scrub. He took the bandage and wrapped it around the cut. His hands were steady. He tested the knot, then returned the rest of the cloth. Jess smiled and nodded. Sergeant Reed climbed onto the drum and adjusted the hose. "I never knew vendors could do this," he said, voice low. Malik gave a small shrug. "I was never just a vendor," he replied. The soldiers looked at him with new respect. They loaded their packs with water and prepared to move out. Outside the cave, a breeze stirred the dust. The squad formed a circle around the well. Malik stood at the edge, watching the horizon. He sensed movement, far away shapes drifting like mirages. He scanned the sky and the dunes, alert for any threat. His heart kept time with his training. Observe, decide, act. The soldiers finished filling their drums. Private Jess tested one more cup and passed it to a weary corporal. He drank and sighed with relief. Malik stepped forward and offered water to a young private who had never seen combat. The boy drank and stared at Malik's calm face. He swallowed. "Hard, thank you," he whispered. Malik only nodded. Sergeant Reed beckoned Malik aside. "We need to secure this area before we leave," Reed said. He pointed to the distant ridge. "Those aliens might be waiting," Malik agreed. He motioned to two soldiers and sent them to set up a watch. Then he turned to the rest and gave simple orders. "Cover the well. Stay alert. Move quickly." Squad moved into position, taking cover behind rocks and scrub. Malik joined them, crouching beside Jess. They watched the ridge together. No movement came. The suns lowered in the sky and shadows grew long. As dusk approached, Malik thought of Torin again. He wondered where his old comrade was now. He patted his pack, where a faded photograph rested between rations. The photograph showed a group of soldiers in muddy uniforms, smiling despite the cold. Malik touched it lightly and then returned it to its place. "We should rest," Jess said quietly. She stretched her back and sat on a rock. Her eyes were heavy with fatigue. Malik nodded. He knelt by the well and filled a small bowl with water, offered it to her. She drank gratefully. The squad lit a small fire near the cave entrance. The flames glowed orange in the deepening blue of dusk. The soldiers sat around it, eating simple rations of dried meat and flat bread. Malik poured water into each soldier's cup and watched them eat. Their chatter was low and friendly. No one spoke of fear or doubt. They spoke of home, of families waiting on distant worlds. Malik listened. He added a pinch of a spice he carried, a reminder of home. It gave the water a faint sweetness. The soldiers tasted it and grinned. "Not bad for dessert water," a corporal teased. Malik smiled. As night fell, the squad huddled under a clear sky filled with stars. The desert cooled and the fire crackled. Malik felt a calm pride. The convoy had water, the squad had hope, and he had kept them safe. Tomorrow, they would continue their journey through alien lands. Dangers would come again. But for now, they rested. Malik lay beside the fire watching. The stars. He thought of the metal on Kashlak, of Torrin's grateful eyes, and of the boy in today's desert. He closed his eyes and listened to the wind. The squad's breathing was steady. The desert night was quiet. Malik carried their trust like a shield. He knew his past had shaped him, but it was this moment, protecting those around him, that defined him now. And in that silence, under a sky of countless lights, the water vendor rested, ready for the trials ahead. The convoy crept closer to the alien fortress under a pale morning sky. The walls rose from the sand like dark teeth. Guard towers loomed at each corner, their surfaces gleaming with strange alloys. Soldiers checked their weapons and loaded extra. Water canteens. Malik walked at the front, water drum strapped to his back. He felt the weight, but did not slow. His eyes scanned every detail, the slit windows, the heavy gate, the sentries pacing above. The fortress gates stood closed. Two massive alien figures blocked the entrance. They wore polished breastplates and carried long spears tipped with glowing green crystals. Their eyes glowed with suspicion as humans approached. The squad halted a short distance away. "Sergeant." Reed raised his hand in greeting. The lead alien guard clicked a command in its harsh language. The heavy gates ground open with a thunderous rumble. Inside, a wide courtyard stretched before them. Banners with strange symbols hung from high poles. At the far end, a circular arena was carved into the stone floor. A tall dais with an ornate throne stood beside it. An alien commander, draped in a cloak of silver mesh, sat upon the throne. He inspected the humans with cold interest. Humans seek passage in water. The commander clicked through a translator device. "The well lies within our walls. You may pass only if you prove strength. Provide a champion for the arena." His voice echoed in the courtyard. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. The fortress promised safety but demanded violence. Private Jess drew a breath. She glanced at Malik. He met her gaze and gave a slight nod. He stepped forward from the line of soldiers. The squad froze. Sergeant Reed stared in surprise. "Malik?" he asked softly. Malik inclined his head. "I will fight," he said calmly. The commander's crimson eyes widened. He signaled the guards. They led Malik into the arena. The heavy gates closed behind him with a clang. The sun shone through the open roof, casting a circle of light on the sandy floor. Spectators, aliens of various shapes, gathered on raised platforms around the ring. They clicked and hissed in excitement. Malik stood alone, blade at his side and water pouch on his belt. His uniform looked simple against the fortress walls. Across the arena, the alien champion strode forward. He towered over Malik. His arms were thick as tree trunks. His head bore a ridged crest, and his jaws opened to reveal rows of sharp teeth. In his hand, he held a massive two-handed hammer, its head glowing with energy. The trumpet of challenge sounded. The champion raised his hammer high. Malik drew his blade, a short sword of fine balance. He tested its weight with a steady hand. The champion charged at once, feet pounding the ground like thunder. Dust rose around him. Malik waited until the last moment, then he sidestepped with a quick sliding step. The hammer struck the ground where Malik had stood, cracking the stones. Malik rolled forward and came up behind the champion. He swung the blade in a low arc, aiming for the giant's ankle plate. The blade bit into the armor, and sparks flew. The champion grunted in shock. With a twist, Malik pulled the blade free and ducked under the champion's swinging arm. Hammer crashed into the sand overhead, leaving a crater. Malik sprang up and kicked the champion's knee joint. Metal buckled, and the alien stumbled. Blood like oil seeped from a gap in the armor. The crowd roared. Aliens hissed and clacked their mandibles. Malik kept moving. He did not pause to bask in the noise. He circled the champion, watching every shift of weight. The champion roared and swung the hammer in a wide arc. Malik leapt backward, clearing the blow by inches. He charged forward again, blade pointed. The champion roared and braced. Malik ran up the giant's leg and ducked under the hammer's head. He slashed at the strap, holding the hammer's haft. The binding snapped with a loud crack. The weapon flew from the champion's grasp and landed beyond the arena wall. The crowd gasped. The giant looked down at his empty hands, rage in his eyes. He lunged at Malik with claws extended. Malik stood his ground. He let the champion come close. Then he twisted and caught the alien's arm. With all his strength, he yanked the arm forward, dislocating a joint. The champion screamed in pain. Malik released the arm and stepped back. The champion fell to one knee, then collapsed face first. Silence swept the arena. The sun shone on. Malik's blade still wet with the champion's oil. He bowed his head in respect, then sheathed his sword. The gates behind him opened again. Soldiers poured into the arena to lead Malik back. The alien commander rose from his throne, his cloak brushing the ground. He approached and knelt before Malik without invitation. He pressed his forehead to the sand in a gesture of submission. Then he stood and spoke into his translator. "You have proven strength and honor. The well is yours. You may pass, water vendor." Malik nodded and turned toward the gate. He paused when Sergeant Reed appeared at the entrance. Reed's face shone with pride. He placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "You did more than we expected," he said. "You saved us all." Malik only smiled softly. Back in the courtyard, the squad gathered. Private Jess squeezed Malik's arm in thanks. The wounded corporal limped forward and offered a hunk of bread. The soldiers distributed water and rations. Laughter and relief replaced tension. The fortress guards stood aside, letting the convoy pass deeper into the walls. Inside the fortress, narrow passageways led to a hidden reservoir. Water poured from ancient pipes into large cisterns. Malik opened the valve of his drum and watched water flow free. Sunlight filtered through grated skylights, making the water sparkle like crystals. The squad filled every container, humming. Quietly in gratitude as they worked, Malik glanced back at the arena. He could still hear the echoes of combat, but he thought of Torin's words from long ago. A warrior protects the weak. He touched the scar on his forearm, a reminder of that promise. The day had tested him, and he had kept faith with his squad when every drum and pack was full. The squad marched toward the fortress gate. The alien commander watched from the courtyard, arms crossed in respect. Malik led the way, water drum secure. The convoy rumbled out into the desert once more. Outside, dunes rolled under the hot sun. Soldiers climbed into transports with fresh water and renewed hope. Malik climbed into the lead transport and handed out cups of cool water. Jess drank and sighed with relief. The wounded smiled as they drank. The convoy moved forward, engines humming in harmony. Malik watched the fortress fade into the distance. His heart was calm. He had faced the greatest of challenges and emerged victorious. The squad believed in him now. They knew the water vendor was more than he seemed. They knew he was their deadliest warrior. And as the convoy rolled on toward home, Malik closed his eyes for a moment and thanked the quiet strength that guided him. The desert stretched ahead, but he was ready for whatever trials lay beyond the horizon. Malik climbed into the lead transport as the convoy rolled away from the fortress. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the desert. He held a clay cup of water in his hand and offered it to Private Jess. She took a careful sip and let out a soft laugh. "I never thought water could taste this good," she said. Malik only nodded and watched the transports bump over the dunes. The soldiers settled into their seats. Wounded men leaned against crates of water drums. The engines hummed, and the air smelled of hot metal and cooling water. Malik stepped down and moved between the transports, offering cups to those who could not reach. Each soldier smiled at him with genuine gratitude. He felt a deep pride, but he kept his expression calm. As the convoy passed a rocky outcrop, the ground trembled. A rumble grew beneath their feet. Transports shuddered and came to a halt. Sergeant Reed jumped down and peered at the horizon. "Now?" asked a corporal, voice tight. Malik joined Reed and scanned the dunes. Far ahead, a line of armored alien vehicles carved tracks through the sand. They were heading straight for the convoy. Private Jess drew her rifle and took cover behind. A water drum. Malik stepped into the open. "They will attack," he said. "We need a plan." Soldiers looked to Reed, but Reed looked to Malik. "You lead," he said quietly. Malik nodded. He called 2 soldiers to him and pointed to the nearest ridge. "Take the high ground there. Cover our flank." Then he turned to the rest. "Prepare to move the water drums into a defensive circle." The soldiers obeyed. They shifted water drums into a hollow square, creating a low wall. Inside, wounded took shelter. Malik moved among them, checking their bandages and offering water. Outside, the 2 soldiers climbed the ridge and raised a signal flag. Soon their silhouettes appeared, rifles at the ready. The alien vehicles drew closer. They stampeded across the sands, weapons mounted on turrets. Bolts of green light flashed from the vehicles, pinging against the metal drums. Sparks flew, but the drums held. Malik called out orders. "Hold fire until they are within range. Conserve your ammo." The soldiers nodded, steadying their rifles. When the first vehicle came over the ridge, soldiers opened fire. Bullets cracked in the air. Green bolts answered, striking the drums with dull thuds. One drum dented but held its shape. Malik took a rifle from a stunned private and aimed at the vehicle's turret. He fired a steady burst, hitting the weapon mount. The turret spun off and clattered into the sand. The vehicle veered and crashed into a dune. Its engines sputtered, and it lay still. The soldiers cheered. Malik handed the rifle back and dashed toward the next target. He sprinted across open ground, dodging enemy fire. A bolt missed him by inches, kicking sand into his face. He rolled behind a drum and climbed on top. From there, he had a clear shot. He spotted the lead vehicle's driver hatch opening. An alien soldier climbed out and raised his weapon. Malik aimed his rifle and fired. The alien fell back into the cab. Vehicle lurched and swerved away. 3 more vehicles paused, their drivers uncertain. Malik jumped down and charged forward. Blade in hand, the soldiers watched in awe as Malik sprinted toward the nearest vehicle. He reached its side, grabbed the tire, and yanked it free. The vehicle tipped and collapsed on its side. Scrambled to escape, Malik kicked open the driver door and pulled the hatch down, trapping them. The vehicle crashed onto its roof with a loud clang. The remaining vehicles retreated. Their mounts whirled and spat more fire, but the soldiers held their ground. Private Jess fired from the ridge, her aim true. Malik moved back to the defensive circle and helped load the wounded onto transports. Sergeant Reed arrived and clapped Malik on the back. "You turned the tide," he said. Malik shook his head. They stood together. The convoy restarted its engines and moved on. The alien vehicles lay scattered behind them, disabled and abandoned. The sun set in a blaze of red and orange. Light danced on the water drums, making them shine like beacons. Inside the transports, soldiers drank deeply, celebrating their victory. Malik climbed into the lead transport once more. He poured water into cups for the wounded. Private Jess sat beside him, her eyes bright with relief. "You've saved us again," she said softly. Malik handed her a cup. "We saved each other," he replied. She nodded and drank. The journey continued under a sky full of stars. The desert night was cool and quiet. The convoy moved steadily toward home. Malik sat quietly, listening to the hum of engines and the soft breaths of sleeping soldiers. He thought of the day's struggles, the fortress, the battle, the attack, and felt a calm resolve. When dawn broke the next day, the convoy reached the edge of human territory. Green fields of engineered plants replaced the dunes. Soldiers cheered as they spotted a distant base. Transports rumbled down a paved road. Malik climbed down and gave a final cup of water to a child waiting at the gate. The child smiled and waved. Sergeant Reed met Malik at the entrance. "You've earned rest now," he said. "We will take it from here." Malik looked at the squad, tired but alive and grateful. He nodded and stepped back. He glanced at his water drum, now empty. Then he walked toward the shade of the base's walls, ready to rest and to tell no tales of the deadliest warrior hidden inside the humble water vendor. Malik woke before dawn, the base quiet in the pale light. He washed dust from his face and tightened the straps on his uniform. Though his mission was done, his mind still hummed with memories of battle and brotherhood. He stepped outside and watched the sun rise over the distant dunes. Soldiers stirred in their bunks and gathered their gear. Private Jess found Malik by the gate and handed him a steaming cup of tea. She smiled tiredly. "We leave today," she said. Malik nodded and sipped the tea. Its warmth spread through him like comfort. Sergeant Reed approached with a folded cloth. Inside lay a simple patch with a silver wave symbol. "For you," Reed said softly, "for saving us all." Malik touched the patch and felt its weight. He slipped it into his pocket without a word. The convoy rumbled out of the base gates under a bright sky. Transports carried water drums and wounded alike. Malik rode in the lead, scanning the road ahead. The air smelled of earth and promise. Journeying home felt like a new battle calmer, but no less important. When they reached the old settlement, children ran to greet them. They carried banners painted with symbols of water and hope. Villagers cheered, voices loud under the sun. Malik dismounted and distributed cups of water. Each child drank eagerly, their laughter echoing in the square Anne. Elders stepped forward, draped in simple robes. He bowed to Malik and offered a basket of fruit. "You are our savior," the elder said, voice quivering. Malik accepted the basket with both hands. He knelt to meet the elder's eyes. "I only did my duty," he replied quietly. Soldiers formed a line behind Malik, returning the cheers. Jess stood at his side, her face bright with pride. Wounded men stood tall in fresh uniforms, leaning on canes or crutches. They raised their cups to Malik in salute. He raised his cup in return, the water glittering in the sunlight. After the ceremony, Malik moved among the crowd. He handed water to weary traders and to merchants in dusty stalls. His wheelbarrow cart stood ready, filled with clay cups and fresh water. Villagers stared at him anew, not as a humble vendor, but as a hero. Malik felt strange under their gaze. He remembered the dusty marketplace where aliens once mocked him. He rolled his cart down the main street. Villagers stepped aside, bows in hands. Each face held gratitude. Malik offered water with a gentle nod. His calm voice carried, "Fresh water for your thirst." The words felt different now, filled with memory and meaning. As the day warmed, Malik found a quiet corner by the well. He refilled his drum and tightened the lid. He watched dust swirl in the noonday heat. Memories from the battlefield flickered in his mind, the fortress, the ambush, the arena. Each memory was a step that led him home. Private Jess approached, carrying a wooden board with a map etched into it. "We plan to rebuild the old aqueduct here," she said. "Your guidance would help." Malik studied the map. The old aqueduct ran dry long ago, its stones cracked by sand. He traced a line with his finger. "We can redirect water from the new reservoir," he suggested. Jess smiled. They walked together to the edge of the settlement, where broken arches of the aqueduct rose like fallen giants. Soldiers and villagers gathered stones and tools. Malik directed teams to clear debris and to shore up weak walls. Each movement was careful, like a dance he once learned on training grounds. These walls would carry water, not weapons. As dusk fell, lanterns appeared along the aqueduct's path. Malik climbed a small ladder and lit the first lamp. Its glow revealed patterns of moss and carved symbols. Villagers watched in quiet awe. A child reached up to touch the lamp's warm glass. Malik lowered her gently. "Be careful," he whispered. That night the settlement held a feast in the square. Long tables lined the streets, covered with fruits, breads, and steaming stews. Soldiers, villagers, and merchants sat side by side. Tables glowed under lantern light. Jess raised a cup of water. "To Malik," she called, "our water vendor and warrior." Everyone echoed the toast. Malik stood and held his cup high. He cleared his throat. "I am neither better nor worse than you," he said. "I only did what needed doing." His voice was soft, but it carried through the square. Villagers fell silent, listening. In that quiet, they understood his humility and his strength. After the feast, soldiers sang songs of home and of victory. Their voices rose in harmony under starlit skies. Malik joined softly, his voice low. He thought of Torin from Kashlak, of the boy at the gate, of each life he touched. These songs were his final battlefield songs of peace and of water. When the lanterns dimmed and the square emptied, Malik walked alone to the aqueduct's edge. He lay down on the stone and stared at the stars. The lamps blinked like distant moons. He felt his heart slow. The night breeze carried stories of desert and battle and hope. He closed his eyes and remembered the first time he sold water on a dusty world. He remembered being mocked and underseen. He recalled catching the vial for the child, saving lives, leading men, and standing in an arena. Each moment had shaped him, but it was her under starlight and on ancient stone that he understood who he truly was. Malik rose and brushed dust from his sleeves. He walked back to his cart, empty but ready to fill again. Tomorrow he would sell water in the market and help rebuild the aqueduct. He would teach soldiers and villagers that strength could flow quietly, like water through stone. As dawn approached, Malik returned to his small home at the settlement's edge. He hung the silver wave patch above his bed, next to his worn cloak. He laid out his blade and cleaned it by oil lamp. Then he closed his eyes and let sleep claim him. In dreams, he walked battlefields and marketplaces in one long journey. Felt the weight of his water drum and the heft of his blade. He heard the cheers of soldiers and the laughter of children. And he knew that being a water vendor and a warrior was not a contradiction, but a single life shaped by duty and by care. And so Malik rested, ready for the next sunrise. When he would rise again as the humble water vendor who carried hope and strength in every drop he sold,